Welcome back to Financial Issues. I'm Dan Celia. It's great to be here. And we've got a special guest, as I've told you in the last segment, Governor Mike Huckabee. Folks, you need to go to MikeHuckabee.com, MikeHuckabee.com. And Governor Huckabee is in Iowa, traveling to his next event, I believe in Des Moines. And we have the privilege of having the governor with us. Governor, welcome. Thank you for being with us.
Well, it's my pleasure, Dan. It's always a real delight to be with you, and I appreciate what you do for your listeners in giving them a lot of great insights, and thanks for letting me be on with you today.
Well, I'm glad to do it, and I appreciate you saying that, and I appreciate you taking the time. Folks, you know, we've got to decide whether we are going to allow the polls to dictate the destiny of this country. It's one of the things that we have got to sit back and take a long, hard look at the people that we have opportunity to hand this country over to. And we've got to think about who God has raised up and who God would want us to fight for. I believe one of those people is Governor Mike Huckabee. And I know that he's going to make an impact there in Iowa. I pray that this is going to be a springboard into all the other states, as it should be. But it's up to the people of Iowa to come out and caucus, to get there, no matter how cold, no matter the weather, and do the right thing, do what the Lord has laid on their heart. Governor, I know that you're going to make a difference. We've talked before. And tell me, as we think about the difference between Republican leadership and Democratic leadership, and if I had to say right now, I would have to say, what exactly is the difference? Because I'm having a hard time figuring it out. I've been around, I'm probably a year or two older than you. I've been around a long time. We watch all of these different Congresses over the years, presidents. I'm telling you, is there any difference? What are we looking for here?
You know, Dan, one of the reasons these voters are so angry is because it doesn't seem to matter whether the Democrats or the Republicans are in power. The same policies that cost Americans jobs, that just serve as a gut punch to middle-class working people, especially the kind of people that stand on their feet all day working, the ones that lift heavy things and sweat through their clothes. And, Dan, here's why. Because the same donors who buy Democrats, they buy Republicans too. And what I'm telling people out here in Iowa, if you want to know what your candidate is going to do, follow the money. See where his contributions come from. There are only about 3 of us in the entire race on the Republican side who are not almost fully funded by Wall Street, hedge fund managers, big banks, brokerage houses. And I'm telling you, when special interests give you the money, they're going to have an expectation. And so many of these candidates, they're going to do exactly what the donors want them to do because they have to. And sadly, Democrats get the money, Republicans get the money, and the American people get the shaft.
You know, I've said this before on the air, and if you want to see America turn around in a heartbeat from an economic standpoint, elect a candidate, elect Mike Huckabee's tax plan, and see how things change instantly. And every time I talk about this, people argue with me and they want to say, well, yeah, but it takes years for that to work through the system. My response is, no, it doesn't. It just takes saying and a plan and a confidence that this plan is going to get enacted and things will turn around from a business perspective in a heartbeat. Businesses want certainty. They don't want moving targets. And they want to know that there's a tax plan that's going to turn this economy around. Are you hearing those same things?
Absolutely, Dan, and especially from small business owners that spend so much of their resources paying for accountants and attorneys to advise them on tax matters. Business people want to make business decisions, not tax decisions. But under our tax code that's so complicated, Americans spend $500 billion every year just complying with the tax code. It's incredibly inefficient. But one of the reasons that I'm a strong supporter of the fair tax, which means we would pay tax at the point of consumption and not at the point of productivity, is because think about what would happen if $31 trillion of capital were reinvested in the United States, which would happen if it was not going to be subjected to the largest, most extensive corporate tax code in the world. We would supercharge the economy. Stephen Moore, the economist, says it would be like rocket fuel for the American economy, and it truly would.
It would, and it would be instantaneous, and I mean that. Obviously, the money not flowing instantaneously, but if it were appearing as though you or that plan were being elected, and I know it's going to take an awful lot of negotiating across both sides of the aisle to make that happen, but I think you're the only one that has the leadership, the governing abilities, that is an outsider. Nobody else has that, and I think you're able to do that. How about our religious freedom? What about this? I know you and I are on the same page when we think of the church. We have so many safety nets that have become a hammock because these are things that the church used to do. The church took care of their people. Charitable giving was, people took care of the church took care of their congregations. We've lost that. What are we spending from the government that we could be saving if we continue to see strong commitment to charitable organizations, charitable giving, and the church, and motivating those churches to get more and more involved?
Dan, one thing I've said for many years is that if every person who goes to church and says, I love Jesus, would give one dime out of each dollar they earn that would help the poor, the widows, and the orphans, we wouldn't be giving the government 50 cents out of every dollar we earn to do a lousy job of poverty programs that do more to perpetuate poverty and to create the industry of poverty, giving people jobs in the poverty sector. But it doesn't help the people who are actually stuck down there in the hole of poverty. And when I hear people say, that they want smaller government, well, let me tell you the quickest way to get there. When people's own personal charitable giving is bigger, government will be smaller. And there is a direct correlation. And by the way, the church will do an infinitely better job of helping people get on their feet, helping people get out of poverty than the government ever will, because the government is not really in the charity business. The church is supposed to be. And that's why I think when people talk about issues like even candidates and how much they give, I think that's fair game. My wife and I made the commitment. We actually, even as teenagers, before we ever married, we believed that tithing was just our sort of base, fundamental Christian responsibility. We've done it our whole marriage of 41 and a half years. Never thought we'd do anything differently because, after all, how can I say that I'm going to put God first in my life if I put him last in my budget?
And that is something that the candidates are not talking about. And the other thing is that really when we think about the cost and money in government, I am so confused as to why we are not hearing more from the Republican candidates, with the exception of you, on pro-life. I mean, it is amazing to me that we're not hearing more about that. Is it just a plague that everybody wants to stay away from as part of their platform?
Well, to a lot of people, this is a political issue. To me, it's a moral issue. And it is an issue that requires us to take bold action, because we often end every political speech, even Democrats, with the phrase, God bless America. But how does God bless a country that's killing 4,000 babies every single day? I believe that what we need to be talking about is not just defunding Planned Parenthood, which is certainly something we ought to do, but I've said publicly that as president, I will invoke the 5th and the 14th Amendment. Both of these do more than defund Planned Parenthood. It recognizes that every unborn child is a person, is entitled to due process before you can deprive them of life or liberty. It would effectively end abortion, literally end it nationwide, because you can't abort a human being that is denied due process. I mean, we can't even carry out an execution of a death row inmate who has murdered 20 people unless that person has due process. Here's the question. Is the unborn child a human being or not.
Yeah.
Because if the unborn child is a human being, it's entitled to due process protection under the 5th and 14th Amendment. And as president, I would see to it that those children were protected. Now, if it's not a human being, if it's just a clump of cells or a blob of tissue, that's a wholly different deal. But for me, this is not political. I have told people that I didn't become pro-life because of politics. I got into politics because I was pro-life.
Tell us about Iowa. Talk to the people of Iowa and where you are and what they need to do.
Well, Dan, every 4 years, some talking heads in New York will tell the people of Iowa who they're going to vote for, what they're going to do. And every 4 years, the people of Iowa surprise them, and they do what they choose to do. This has been a media-driven election.
Yes.
And the power of voting is being taken away by the people because they're inundated with coverage of only particular candidates. The candidates' coverage determine whether they're on the main stage on the debate, how much time they get, how many questions they get, how many mentions they get during the week. And that's a vicious cycle. But the people of Iowa can totally upend and take this process back away from the East Coast media if they go out and shock the country by voting for me. But I'm telling you, it would just be a complete upset to the East Coast elites who sit in their well-lit studios and pontificate about what the people of Iowa are going to do. And they really don't know because nobody's voted yet.
Well, and that's exactly where we've got to be, folks, all of us here. We cannot let the media, the polls, or anything else dictate what we know is right in the eyes of God, what we know is right for this country and for the Constitution of the United States. Governor Mike Huckabee, I sure do appreciate you being with us. As always, thank you for taking some time to speak with us and to speak to the people, the listeners that we have in Iowa. Folks, if you're in Iowa, everywhere in the country, go to MikeHuckabee.com, MikeHuckabee.com. Read what the governor's plans are to turn this country around. And I think if there's anybody that can do it, it's Governor Mike Huckabee. I believe that the Lord has raised him up for a time such as this, and we need to get behind the governor, get behind the candidate that we think is going to be the best candidate. MikeHuckabee.com. I hope you'll all go there, MikeHuckabee.com. Thank you again, Governor. Sure appreciate it.